Tsuro is an ancient Japanese word that means I'm tripping you so that you may be eliminated prematurely and I may live longer. It's a little bit of a free translation, I know, but it kind of captures the spirit of the game, if not the actual meaning of the word. Tsuro, in fact, is a game of abstract strategy, of path building, and tile lane in which you will try to remain on the board for as long as possible, possibly for longer than the players do, because the last player to remain on the board is going to be the winner. And sometimes you will be peacefully going your own way, building your own path, and just philosophically watching the other players as they get eliminated one after the other when their path naturally arrives to a conclusion. In some other occasions, you may find yourself, as the opportunity arises, giving them a gentle push just to rush things a little bit and to make sure that they leave the board prematurely. So this is a game that, depending on the circumstances, can be played in a more philosophical and peaceful way, or can be played pretty cutthroat. Let me show you how the game works and how this is possible. The game is played on this absolutely gorgeous board, which is divided in squares, and on the outside edge of the largest square you have these small marks here, and at the beginning of the game each player places his pawn on one of these marks. You can choose whichever mark, so you can choose to start close to the opponents, far from the opponents, or another opponent, completely up to you. But the closer you are, the riskier things may be, because you're more exposed to what the other player is doing in that area. Each player then receives a hand of 3 tiles from this deck here, and a player's turn is extremely simple. The player chooses a tile from his hand, places the tile in front of his pawn, and then moves his pawn as much as possible. So that is until the end of the path on which the pawn is. After that, the active player draws another tile from the deck, and the player's turn is over, and it is the other player's turn to play. Suppose that now it is the black player's turn. The black player plays this tile there, then he will have to move like this all the way up to there, and then the blue player will go through the same procedure. Now there will be cases whereby placing a tile you will have to move more than one pawn. Suppose that this is the situation, then if a tile is placed there, if this tile is placed there like that, it doesn't matter who plays that, you would have still to move the red pawn there and the black player and the black pawn all the way there. And this is why, if you're close to other players' pawns, you are at risk of being moved in locations where you don't want to be. And this is really how the game works. You keep placing tiles and moving your own pawn and occasionally other players' pawns. And if at some point your pawn ends up being on the same path with another pawn, the two of them disintegrate each other. Both pawns are eliminated and both players are out of the game. Also, if the path on which you are leads your pawn out of the board, then you also are eliminated. Like that. In the early phases of the game, it is forbidden to create a path that would kick your pawn out of the board and would eliminate you from the game. The point is that you cannot do that voluntarily. Later in the game, when the board starts being full with tiles and not many locations are available, not many places to develop a path are available anymore, then you may be forced to kick yourself out of the board, and at that point it is legal, actually it is mandatory, because you have to play a tile. If you play a tile and you are forced to eliminate yourself, of course you are out of the game. And you're out of the game also if another player's tile forces your pawn out of the board. If you are the last player to have a pawn on the board after everybody else has left the board, then you win the game. If several players are eliminated at the same time at the end of the game, they're the last players to be in the game and the last players to be eliminated at the same time, then they tie for victory. And that is a situation that will occur fairly often. At least it has occurred fairly often in our games. Nowhere on the box or in the rule book is the word Zen mentioned, I think, as far as I can remember. And yet, as I brought the game to my group, everybody was like, oh, look, a Zen game, a Zen game. Maybe this because of the art or because of the deal of the paths that intersect, and there is a certain degree of chaos and randomness that you have to deal with. You have to create your path to find your way, to yield from time to time, and other times you have to bend things to make things work. I don't know. Pretty much all I know about Zen comes from the old TV show Kung Fu with David Carradine, so I don't even know that I'm very qualified, but somehow it felt that way. It felt that there was a degree of how can I call it, pop zen in it. On the other hand, there must be a certain level of strategy too, because in every game that I played, I lost, or in any case, I performed very poorly. I always ended up being last or second to last, that is, being kicked out of the game first or a second. And if the game was completely random, then well, there would be times in which I would have done a little bit better, other times a little worse. The fact that I lose the game consistently really must mean that there is a strategy. There must be a strategy that other players have figured out, and I have not. But that is a personal thing. I can still see that there must be a way to optimize your way in which you play your tiles and in which you create your environment around you. Again, luck is a big thing. We had a game in which a player kept receiving tiles that would allow him to create a straight line, just to go from one side of a tile to the opposite side, and he was just on the side of the board, and he just drew this straight line all around the board as we were in the middle of the board, fighting and getting in each other's way and pushing each other out of the board. He was just very quietly and peacefully walking around there. In other games, that would have not been possible because of the different sets of tiles that were assigned randomly. So random, and on the other hand, the strategy that I cannot fathom, but I believe is there somewhere. Because of this balance and also because of the very simple rules, I believe that this is a game that you can play with very young gamers. Thanks to the random factor, they may also have chances to win against you. Your children may really feel empowered by this. And if you bring this game to a game night with adults, it can be a nice warm-up game. It can be a nice filler, even if you are eliminated early, as it happened pretty often to this guy here. The game is still somewhat pleasant to watch. The game has a certain aesthetic quality. Just seeing how the net of paths is gradually formed by the interaction of different players, and how the pawns start moving in this sort of like, crazy ways around. I found it pleasant, honestly, even just to watch. And then the game is so short that then after 10-15 minutes you can try Tsuro again, or you can be playing another game. So overall, this is a game that I enjoyed. I think it is a game that has a very individual personality. It feels pretty much its own thing. I think it really can find a spot in my collection. I think this is a game that is going to stay in my collection just because it feels different from other games. Definitely it is different from the majority of games that I play, and I want to figure out what the mystery at the core of this game is. If you can figure out the strategy to win in this game, please let me know so that I can get my revenge against Kevin Wenzel of 2d6.org. Hi Kevin, just kidding, sort of.